Hello, America. I'm Lyle Rapacki, and this is Arizona Today. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna pre-warn you. This is a pretty serious Arizona Today. Not that the others haven't been or informative, but we are going to discuss, my guest and I, some issues dealing with national security. This is not a joke. This is not some theatrical. This gentleman who I'm about to introduce has been working in this field for quite a while, and over the last 3 years with Senator Mark Fincham, who's not with us just yet. He's supposed to be showing up, but he may be preoccupied with some Senate business. And the Election Fairness Institute, we have, at least I have, had a little hand in reviewing what has been worked on for 20 years, I think. And it has political implications, clearly financial implications, and financial implications at the local, county, and state level, as you're going to find out. My guest is Shawn Taylor. He's a retired law enforcement officer of a number of years. I won't say how old because that'll make him old, how many years. But he was retired. He can't give me a citation anymore, so I'm happy there. He retired as a chief deputy, chief of police, and he has been involved in investigations, both drugs, conventional law enforcement investigations, and what you're about to hear. What started, and I don't want to get too much into it, I want Mr. Taylor to share it with you, but what began as a drug bust, I'll say, and the finances connected to it led Mr. Taylor into an extremely complex, multidimensional racketeering and financial fraud issues. And that's what you're about to hear. And I'm very glad and very honored to have met this gentleman. I think now, Shawn, 3 years ago. I think it's about three and a half. And
Yeah, about 3 years now.
it's about three. I'm getting older. He looks the same as well. As well. His beard was a little darker then. But other than that, it's been great getting to know him and work with him. And I say work in a very minor way. I've had a very minor role in this. But what you're about to hear, ladies and gentlemen, is pretty darn sobering. And it is national security level. And I am very honored and privileged that Chief Taylor chose to come on to Arizona Today to announce this. He's about to go ahead and relay all of this information on several other national platforms. So thank you, Chief, for choosing Arizona Today and putting up with me.
Thanks, Lyle. It's been a long road. You and Senator Fincham here for the last 3 years, really helping push this along and help get the momentum and getting this in front of the people we needed to. And it's hard to believe that this started almost 15 years ago. This investigation, and to see it coming to where it's come. And what I've realized is we've had 15 years of getting it here. But now the fight is really starting to begin. Now we're going to be stepping into the ring.
Chief, let me ask you again. Really simple. Go back 15 years. You made and we don't need to get into the details, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get in as many details as we can. Believe me. But there's going to be a couple of questions I'm sure the audience would ask if they were here, ladies and gentlemen. If you have questions that I have not asked and you would like to ask the chief, go ahead and email me at arizonatoday at gmail.com, arizonatoday at gmail.com, or go to my website, arizonatoday.org, and write the questions. And I'll bring Chief Taylor back, and I'll just hold up questions. I've done that with other guests, and you know that, so I'll just hold up the questions. But for today, please take a deep breath, everybody. You're going to hear some very startling, very alarming, very sobering, that's redundant on purpose because you're going to find out why, information. But let me begin at a really seventh grade level, Chief. You did a drug bust, let's say 15 years ago. I'm going to say pretty normal drug bust. A vehicle's going down the street, you stop it. And that's what began not only you investigating drug trafficking, but also money trafficking.
Yeah, we ended up getting some intelligence on a large amount of narcotics that had come into the state of Tennessee. Is about $1 million load of narcotics that had come across the border because we had an open border. That case tied into the political sphere, but it also tied into money laundering and some local banks. We followed the evidence that we had and continued the case, and to the point now that it's developed into the political sphere in a major way, going into campaign donations, tying into what we believe to be foreign governments, foreign adversary governments, CCP, and things like that. Um, it's amazing the infrastructure that the cartel and some of our foreign adversaries have put together in probably about 20 to 25 years. And it's time for some accountability.
So what began, and please correct me, and I'm not trying to minimize disrespectfully, but what started as a interdiction of some drugs, which you took off the streets, quote unquote, and the money associated with it, you began to see a pattern of monies, large amounts and steady amounts of monies coming into your state. Is that correct?
That's correct. What we ended up identifying is some of the individuals that were involved in the narcotics trafficking and human trafficking, by the way. That's also been documented in this case. What we found out is they were providing funds to different individuals that were running for office. And so we had narcotics money and human trafficking funds that were going into campaign finance. And as soon as we identified that, that takes you from your DTO, your drug trafficking organization investigation, into the money laundering and then into political corruption. So this case really developed extremely fast from just the street level interdiction stop to the money laundering on to the political corruption. And we just followed every lead because you can't leave anything unturned. And it was amazing the information that we were obtaining and on who.
Now, when you graciously allowed me to participate beginning 3 years ago in Senator Mark Fincham, Arizona State Senator Mark Fincham, who is the founder and president of Election Fairness Institute, whose function in that institute was to provide for fair elections, fair and honest elections. One of the first things I remember you sharing, and this is complex because they're multi-level on this whole thing, ladies and gentlemen. You're going to find out in these two parts. We're going to do a part one and part two. But one of the first things that caught my attention was that you already had, this was 3.5 years ago, already had solid evidence of monies going into political coffers and, please correct me, Chief, paying off political officials.
That's how it appears at this point in time. And where we have money that came from illicit acts going into the political coffers for as donations. And we believe that was done to be able to help these people get away with the crime that they've committed. And, we've identified money going into different political campaigns. We've identified money going into judges, are tied into things that judges are tied to, different bank accounts that judges are tied to, district attorneys, governors. It's all the way up and down the spectrum, from your local level all the way to the very top.
I remember one of the issues that we began to talk to you about, again, with election fairness, was Senator Fincham was presenting to the courts in Arizona, along with Kerry Lake, why their elections were illegal, why their elections were fraud. Somebody could use another word, but at my seventh grade level, I'll just say it that way. And how I met you was being asked to use my contacts and my privileges to bring certain people together to form kind of like a task force here with you to review what you were discussing, what you had found, and exactly in what process do we go forward. And one of the things that caught my attention, there was many, but one of the things that caught my attention, and you just mentioned it, is that monies from drugs and trafficking were going to judges who were being paid not to hear cases, at least election cases. And the monies that you had uncovered, and ladies and gentlemen, we're not talking about him just throwing up a theory. You, please, Chief, correct me anywhere I'm wrong here. You documented step by step the money's coming in to Tennessee and then outside of Tennessee, and they're coming to Arizona. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But the money's coming in. You had documented, you had traced almost, and I'm not being funny, so please, Greg, almost to the dollar of who is getting what. And the work that you've done is breathtaking. There's no pun intended. It's breathtaking. How, and I never asked you this, correct me if I'm wrong, how did you document to the dollar? Now, I know some examples, and I know how you traced some things and shared it with us. And I brought in a law enforcement person or two also in one of our secure phone calls. I brought in an attorney also. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know that we went about this very studiously. We went about this very seriously. There was no stone unturned. But one of the things that caught my attention was the chief had gone ahead and just about documented every single dollar that went to somebody. And we'll talk about some of the names and some of the specifics coming up in maybe part 2 here. But I was stunned that you had done such incredible work and the monies kept coming. And if I'm not mistaken, what started out was monies coming in through Tennessee. And maybe you can explain that next now. How are they coming in through Tennessee? But then they were going out to several states. And by the time I think 3.5 years was over, in our multiple calls and consultations, I think I left it at 25 states, 26 states. Now there may be more, but the last briefing I had from you and with you and Senator Fincham was, I think we're up to 26 states that you had documented monies going to elected officials. Now, I don't know if there's a question in there, but can you go back and rehash for us the monies that you took from that drug bust and the trafficking? You started to follow these funds and you saw that they went throughout Tennessee, but then it expanded.
Yeah. So what we started doing is we had to start looking at the relationships between businesses, people, and things like that. And because everything's about relationship when you're doing an investigation, how is one thing related to another? So what we did is we started looking at who these people were around, the businesses that they were affiliated with, the addresses, phone numbers, and things like that, and documenting that and cross-referencing that information with other people who were connected to that same information. And what we did is that started putting together a net, that started creating a net of individuals. So what we were able to do is to identify a specific cell of individuals based off of available open source intelligence. And so we gathered that open source intelligence and basically worked every problem. We worked every address, every location, every person, every phone number. We worked it to a complete outcome, so we knew where to put it on the board. And you think of this as a big murder board, and you put the person's picture up, a location up, a phone number up, and you got that little string going from one to another to another. And what we've started finding again were these very specific cells where people were interconnected. So when we started finding that and we started looking at these individuals through open source intelligence, is we started seeing key individuals that had these, what we have referred to as synthetic mortgages or magic mortgages, where they would have a home that was worth about $220,000. It would be purchased for cash through a shell company. And let's say the home was worth 200,000 and or the home was actually worth 160,000, but they were given 220,000 cash for the home. Then that shell company would purchase another 5 homes in that area. They would bundle those homes together and quick deed them to another company, another shell company, who would then in turn take out one of these mortgages. And what they've done is they artificially inflated the prices of the homes to cover the money that had already been placed in the bank illegally. Because what we have found out through things like the Bank Toronto Dominion, who was just hit with a $3.1 billion fine because they failed to report cash transactions to FinCEN and FinTrack, or suspicious activity reports. And once that was found, what they found is that they had money coming in from the CCP for the fentanyl trafficking that the cartel is doing for the CCP. It was money that was being deposited from the cartel and the human trafficking. And there was no cash transaction reports. There were no suspicious activity reports that were being generated. And so we had millions and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars being deposited in these banks that nobody really knew about except those specific banks. So to cover up the tracks, what they did is they took out these fraudulent mortgages to cover that money. And because you've got to be able to cover that money somehow. And so that's where your banks are complicit. So this went from a local investigation to it went national very quickly, to the point that this is now transnational, and we have 100% identified it going into the political system.
Now, I remember, and please always correct me on this. I don't want to misspeak, but I'm trying to get my head wrapped around it in such a way where I can share it now with the public. Ladies and gentlemen, it was really detailed. I'm going to tell you, we went through, I can think, Chief, maybe three briefings, three or four that that you did, and you had bullet points, you had word processing, you had all sort of PowerPoints, you had, I mean, it was rather detailed. In fact, I remember a couple of times the information you were giving was so specific, down to the nickel almost, that the people on the call, and again, ladies and gentlemen, I brought on very selected law enforcement high ups and an attorney, the federal attorney, to be advising us. And this was just simply so this group could meet and advise the chief, but also ask appropriate questions that actually helped in his continued investigation. Am I doing okay there, Shawn?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
And I remember a couple of times after 2 hours of all of your details and presentation and facts, it was there was silence. I don't think anybody knew what to ask because the details you gave and the arrows, and ladies and gentlemen, on part two, the chief is going to give us a little bit of the PowerPoint that will show you the sophistication of this. And ladies and gentlemen, again, and I'll mention it on part two, it's only a little bit. I'm telling you, because it'll be a couple of hours just for that part of the presentation. There's that much. And this gentleman has spent so many years of his life doing the details that has actually scared a lot of people, because he has uncovered the facts, the truth that can't be hidden. But I remember, Shawn, that we went through those briefings, and there were a good couple of times nobody could ask questions because it was so sobering, so overwhelming. So what I'm hearing you say, and please fill in the blanks here, you started out very quickly, you uncovered money laundering at a very sophisticated level and in multiple states. It went from Tennessee to other states. And then, like you said, they would buy houses. Now, I remember out here in Arizona, and maybe you can share, how did he go from Tennessee to Arizona? But I remember you gave us one example of somebody in political office. That's up to you if you want to name them, but somebody in political office in Arizona who sold their house for, I think, $250,000, and that was legitimate. That was the market value, I think, and they got $2 million or something for it. And then
So
also,
the one that you're talking about, Lyle, and I've got no problem discussing that, is that's Governor Katie Hobbs.
Yeah.
Governor Katie Hobbs was affiliated or is affiliated with a nonprofit that's out of Buckeye, Arizona. And
Yeah.
that Buckeye property that the nonprofit is affiliated with, that home is worth maybe about 300,000. But what we ended up finding is information that was about an $840 million mortgage on that property. And
Whoa, whoa,
then
whoa, whoa. Time
there
out.
was further,
840 million.
yes, sir.
All right. Time out. The house was, I had it wrong. It was not appraised at 250. It was appraised a little higher.
Yes, sir. It's probably about 300,000,
Okay. All right.
350 maybe.
Okay. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, I made a mistake. It wasn't 250. It was like 300, 350,000 appraised in that neighborhood. But she received how much for her nonprofit?
I'm looking at it right now. I'm pulling it up so I can get the numbers correctly. So the home total market value at that time was $341,600.
Okay.
And I found a loan on it for February 14th of 2018. The sale price on February 14th, 2018 was $209,710. But then I also see a mortgage, one of these magic mortgages, for $840,205,891.
All right. I've got to do this again. 840 million.
$205,891.
Okay. I, uh, Chief, is that a mistake? Is there something, the numbers are wrong? Was it calculated wrong? How did you come up with a house that's appraised at basically 300,000 and it turns out 800 million? That's hard to get your hand around.
At first, we thought, hey, does somebody have fat fingers or something like that? Do we have a Scrivener's error? What's the deal here? And we thought at first that could be what we were looking at, but all of a sudden we realized that there was a pattern to what we were seeing. And when we saw that pattern and we identified that pattern and I started investigating the pattern, we started coming up with hundreds of properties like this. And when you have hundreds of properties that are in different states and different counties, these are different properties. And you cannot tell me that we have that many mistakes within our mortgage system and within our property assessor's office individually. So once we were able to discern that there's no way that this is a Scrivener's error, this isn't a optical error on behalf of the AI who's obtaining the information from the county records. Okay. Because what we have seen is the Alta loan mortgage insurance documents. We have seen the tax documents. And when I have an Alta loan mortgage insurance document, I have a deed document and I have the tax worksheet on one property, but all three of these documents have a different sale amount and a different mortgage amount. Those are prime indicators of money laundering. So we knew at that point that these were not just errors.
Okay. Again, please put up with my seventh grade question. I'm a bad guy and I'm laundering money. Aren't I going to run out of money if I give somebody $840 million for their house? I'm
Not when
not
you
trying.
look
I'm
at
not
it
trying to be
in,
funny, but most of us
yeah,
can't deal with that. I mean, the house is 300,000, let's say, and okay, let's say it's 300,000, 350, and I give you $1 million for it. Okay, I'm laundering money for $1 million. Okay, I give you $1 million. Your house is only worth 350, let's say. So you've made some buku bucks, and I've gotten rid of some monies, but 840 million, I'm going to run out of money as the bad guy. I'm not trying to be funny.
well,
I'm
you
just
would
trying to.
think that. You would think that, but here's the problem is that's why they had to have an open border. That's why the Obamas and Biden pushed the open border and kept the border open, because what does that do? That allows the trafficking to continue happening, the narcotics, the fentanyl, and the human trafficking to continue. So, and what people don't seem to understand is if I bring in narcotics and I sell the narcotics, that's a one-time use. But when it goes into the human trafficking and the 300,000 children that were brought into the United States illegally, by the Obama and Biden administration with the open borders. What that does is it gives them a product that they can continually reuse. It's not something that's one and done. It's something that they are going to continue to use. So they're going to continue to profit off of that. They just busted a human trafficking place down in Alabama off of I-65, just south of Nashville, where they had children that were trafficked by a cartel, and these guys were making thousands of dollars a night prostituting these children out at this location. So that is a continuous stream of money that's coming in. So they have to have a way to be able to launder that money. So, human trafficking makes a lot more money. It generates more funds than what narcotics do. And it's because they can keep replenishing it. It's not something that just goes away. The only way that that goes away is if they lose that human product.
So I give away $840 million for a couple of houses. I'm still going to be making money.
Absolutely, yeah. Because what's going to happen is when they put that money in to that mortgage, the money is already in the bank. The bank's going to make the money off of the interest. Okay, so that's where the bank's complicit. They're going to make the money off that interest of 840 million that they just gave you. The rest of that money is going to be put into things like the nonprofits that are tied to Act Blue, which are pushing the social justice movements that we've located. And a lot of the people that are tied to these nonprofits, the board members and the founders of these nonprofits that are using Act Blue as their payer services to take in donations, what they're doing is they're using that money that they're taking in from this mortgage, and they're running it through the Act Blue system. And that's why we have the smurfing that James O'Keefe found. Is the Act Blue system was literally built to retain the information of the donors so that they could reuse that donor data, just like in sex trafficking with children. They reuse it continuously.
Hang in there with me, Chief. I have $840 million sitting here in cash on my desk. I really don't, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, don't write me. But I have eight. I'll get an email. Dr. Lau, do you really have I have $840 million in cash sitting here. And I've got to get rid of it. I've got to move it, because by my moving it, I'm going to make more money.
And you're going to give yourself cover. You're going to give yourself top cover by paying off that judge, that district attorney who is not going to bring the charges against you. If the charges do get brought, the judge is going to help hide the charges. Then it's going to give you the political clout that you need with your city commissioners, your county commissioners, your state reps, whoever you are donating that money to.
Because I'm taking the 840 million off my desk, excuse me, and I'm putting it to buy a house or two, but I'm paying off, or I'm paying or contributing judges, lawyers, city councilmen, whatever. So I'm giving.
You're investing in your future.
I'm investing in my future and my cover. It's giving me cover because I'm giving them $1 million to run for city council. I'm just making this up, ladies and gentlemen, as an example. You go ahead and correct me, Chief. So I've got to move $840 million sitting right here on my desk. I got to move it off, because if I don't, it's not going to make any money. It's just going to sit here, $840 million. So I've got to move it and get it going so I can make more money coming in, but also the money that I'm sending out will have benefits. Not only will it give me cover and buy me influence, but I guess I'll have some interest coming in also, because it goes to places where I'm investing. Is that right?
You're investing in your future to have your top cover, because if you're allowed to continue these nefarious activities that are illegal, then what that's going to do is it's going to generate more money for you in the long run. So what you're doing is they're investing in their future by keeping the judges and the DAs and the political officials who can bring them to justice and stop it from happening. It allows them to keep going, because now they've got the people who can stop it, who have been bought off, who will no longer stop it. And so that's where your money ends up going. But you also have to remember that the money is going to end up somewhere else. It's also going to end up in your media. And the media that I'm talking about is the media that's giving out the propaganda. We have to look at how many of these news commentators and things like that that are putting out these propaganda stories that have suddenly gotten book deals that are written by ghostwriters and things of that nature. So what they're doing is it's a multifaceted attack uh, uh, on our on all of our systems, our judicial system, our election system, on everything, on our banking infrastructure. It is a huge multifaceted attack, and it's coming from foreign adversaries, and we've been able to prove that.
All right, so let's, if you're okay, take a deep breath. Let's back up just a little bit. I'm a bad guy and I'm in Tennessee. The monies that I'm going to have on my desk have got to come from the sale of drugs, the sale of children, the profiting of children being used in one form or another. Okay. How am I getting the drugs? I'm in Tennessee and I'm sitting here. How are the drugs coming to me?
So we've identified different ways. The one where we took down the $1 million load of narcotics came in through a tractor trailer, which is a very good way. They're running stuff through produce and things like that in tractor trailers and dispersing it coming up from the border because the border was wide open. So we have that way. We also have stuff being flown in. We know of airdrops that are being made as well. We've identified those. We've seen those. So small single engine aircraft that are bringing stuff in. We also have the waterways here in the state of Tennessee that go all the way out to the Gulf of America, which attach, you got the Mississippi River, and then it comes up into the Tom Bigby waterway into the Tennessee River, where we have the barge traffic, and we've identified that as well. It also comes in by rail. One of the largest cash seizures that was going back to Mexico for the cartels was actually caught on the railroad, and in a grain car. So they're also using the railroad to move product. These people they're geniuses when it comes to different ways to camouflage what they're bringing into the United States. But when you had the help of the actual administration, being the Obama administration and the Biden administration, assisting you by taking Border Patrol off your border, by taking down the wall, by opening up the border, having commercials in Mexico and South America, and teaching people. I mean, they had nonprofits going down to South America and Mexico teaching people how to cross the border. And, that tells me that they're in business with the cartels. Well, now we know they were in business with the cartels because we've identified the money.
So I'm sitting here and fentanyl and other drugs are coming in by plane, boat, and train. And then and now I'm stocked up with fentanyl, drugs, and all that. I've got to move the product. I've got to move the product. So I start to move the product through the creation of my own networks of bad guys through Tennessee. But I believe when I got involved listening to the first briefing 3.5 years ago, it already had gone past Tennessee. They may be coming into Tennessee, but the bad guy was already developing a network, shipping it out or getting it out of Tennessee into other states. And I think at that time, there was 23 or 24 states. And I think over the last couple of years, and you would know better than I, but I think the last briefing I had, I think we were up to 26 states. Now, maybe it's more, but
at this point in time, we can say, I think comfortably, that this is going to affect every state in our union.
Okay. So I'm building my network in 23, 25, 30 states, and I'm shipping drugs to those states, and money's coming back. I now have $840 million here. Okay. And more drugs coming in. So I got to move the drugs. Am I doing okay? Okay.
Yep.
And I've got $840 million that really is not helping me. well, take that back, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. But it's sitting here and I've got to move it in a way to make me that much more valuable. So I'm maybe buying properties, doing things, but I'm also investing in judges, lawyers, politicians, programs that I deem will be beneficial to me. So I'm taking the 840 million and somebody's running for office and I give them 10 million. Doesn't matter to me. Here's 10 million. I know I'm being a little seventh grade-ish on this, but is my theory correct so far?
Yes. So what happened is to help be able to move funds like this, and what we're seeing is Act Blue was specifically set up to retain donor data so they could later come back and donate money quicker, that donor. So once they signed up, and let's use the St. Louis, Missouri Hands Up, Don't Shoot, Black Lives Matter as an instance, for instance, okay? When people when they put those commercials up on TV, everybody was, they pulled at everybody's heartstrings. Oh, look at this, they killed this man, da 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 da. But what people didn't understand is it wasn't just Black Lives Matter. What was behind Black Lives Matter was Act Blue. So now you have this national and this transnational movement of Hands Up, Don't Shoot going through Black Lives Matter. And when people made donations into Black Lives Matter, it actually went through the Act Blue system. Okay. So you had all of this donor data that was generated and it was logged and it was categorized. Okay. Now, what they did is they took that logbook and they kept that logbook. Act Blue did. And what's happened is Act Blue, since it opened its foundation in 2005, is we've had a 30% increase in nonprofits and NGOs. Majority of those are your social justice movements. Hands Up, Don't Shoot, all of that, the COVID initiative, and wearing your mask, and so many of these people that are tied to Act Blue are tied to all of these other little nonprofits and NGOs. And what we're finding is those people that are a part of those little nonprofits are the ones who are receiving the mortgages, these synthetic loans, these magic mortgages. So that's where the money's already in the bank. So we're finding that a lot of these locations of these nonprofits, the operating locations are the homes of these individuals. And that's how they're able to get the money into the system, into the Act Blue system, or into that nonprofit system to move into your political sphere. The other part of the money that's remaining in the bank can go into, again, buying more homes to move more money, and then can be moved to other banks throughout the world. And we've also found where the government of Canada is utilizing three of the very specific banks that we are looking at, including Toronto Dominion and Bank of Montreal and Royal Bank of Canada. We found that Toronto has always been a money laundering capital in the world. We've known that for years. Well, the government under Trudeau in Canada decided to use those three specific banks for what's called a Ukrainian bond, where they were trying to raise money for the war in Ukraine. And of course, we all know that the war in Ukraine is nothing but a money laundering operation. And so Trudeau used those three specific banks. Well, we find it funny that all three of them have all gotten in trouble for the same thing, which is not reporting to FinCEN or FinTrack, and that Toronto Dominion got hit with that $3.1 billion fine, where they're taking in these illicit funds that you're talking about, that from the drugs and the human trafficking. And so that's one of the banks. So those three banks started a company called SimCorp. SimCorp is a payment processor type of company. So what we're looking at is, could that possibly be one of the businesses that is commingling these illicit funds to send to the International Monetary Fund or the Asian Infrastructure Bank to run through the Ukraine and then back into the pockets of the politicians here?
Real quickly, a question: FinCEN and SynPac, those are platforms by which
Those are,
you go ahead.
yeah. So that's what the government uses to track any suspicious activity with money.
Okay. Right.
And banks, if it's suspicious activity with money,
Right.
the banks will fill out paperwork and send it in and document it,
Okay, but
because that's how you end up finding a lot of organized crime and things of that matter.
I have $840 million. I'm moving it as fast as I can, anywhere I can. Anybody who will accept it. Katie Hobbs sells her house for 300,000, 350,000, but gets 2 million or more, and that's just part of
What
that's
one of
just
the
part of
nonprofits that she's a part of
yeah,
received
that's just part
one
of
of these
me.
mortgages.
That's part of me moving this money. So I got to get it off my desk. So you want to sell your house? That's fine. I don't care why. And it's appraised at 350. I'll tell you what, I'll give you 10 million. I don't care because that's 10 million off my desk, a bad guy's
Right.
desk, and I'm giving it to you. What you do with it, I don't really care. Am I doing okay? All right.
Yep.
If then these politicians come up with a couple of other platforms for monies, and then they raise their hand and go, hey, can I have 20 million over here because it's for this platform? Sure, here's 20 million. In fact, here's 30. So I'm moving money off my desk. I have $840 million I got to move, and I'm giving it to whoever wants it. But what that does is it gives me contact with elected officials, judges, lawyers, and very influential organizations or groups. Am I doing okay? So I'm
That's
moving the
correct.
840 as fast as I can. And while I may not make any money immediately back from a Katie Hobbs, I am giving myself some cover through a governor, a mayor, a judge. Okay.
The state
Then,
attorney general.
attorney generals, right? I remember we discussed that in our group briefings. Now, other monies I'm sending to ABC organization or MYC because they're a nonprofit and they claim to feed the homeless. That's fine. So here's 50 million. They may feed the homeless if you look at their actual cost for 10 million for the year, but they pocketed 40 million. I don't even know where. I don't care because again, I got it off my desk.
Well, you need to care, because what happens is with that other 40 million that's there, is that ends up going into the board members that are there, that are paid board members. And a lot of times what we're finding is these politicians and judges, these DAs and things like that will either be on the board or their family member will be on the board and receive payment that way.
What I meant by not caring, I've got this off my desk. I don't care what you do with it.
Right.
It's off my desk. If you ask for 50 million and you're the MICKEY organization, you need 50 million. What for? Feed the homeless. Here's 60 million. When you actually look at the purchase of the MIC corporation, they actually buy $10 million worth of food or something. That other 40 or 50 million is pocketed by these. Okay. That's what I meant.
Yep.
And
And we've even found USAID involved in this as well.
who?
The USAID.
All right, quickly, how
We
did they
found
get it?
some of these organizations were receiving money from that.
So again, the 840 million coming in, is that frequent? I mean, it could be different values, but there's money coming in constantly in there.
We found homes that tied directly to Regina Jones, the former now CEO of Act Blue, was called before Congress. Some of her homes, I think we found up to 3 or 4 of these loans.
Loans, do they have to be paid back?
It's listed as a loan and or mortgage. So that's where, but these are private lender loans where we are private cash transactions, I should say. And since we don't know who the private person is, we don't know if they have to be paid back. Where on a standard mortgage, it's going to list XYZ mortgage company. And we know that that mortgage company or that bank is going to make the interest. But when it's a hard money loan that's not listing the lender, we don't know. We don't know who provided the money. We don't know if there's any type of a document that they've signed to promise to pay back X, Y, or Z. We don't know.
Okay. In the course of one of the briefings that you gave the group I put together, you mentioned how monies were coming off the bad guy's desk, moving it out, getting it going, but it also was going to banks or mortgage companies to be clean, or at least funneled in a little bit more appropriate manner, so it's not coming back to me on my desk here.
Right.
Okay. And one of the banks or mortgage companies was in Arizona. It was in Scottsdale. Now, I'm not going to name it unless you feel led to, but so there was a bank or a mortgage company in Scottsdale. Monies were going into that bank and or mortgage company in Scottsdale, Arizona. It's off my desk. My 840 million, I'm sending them 50 million or whatever it is. They then take it, and what do they do with it? Because they're going to make money.
That's what we're Yeah, that's where we're trying. We have to be able to try to track the money, and that's where
Okay. Okay.
um, there's things I can't get into right now on that because of investigations that are currently going on.
Okay.
Um,
But what you
but I
have,
can say that we do know for a fact through open source intelligence that that company specifically that you're talking about is under law. If you are a company like that, you have brokerage, your broker has to be in the United States. That broker is not in the United States, and we know that for a fact. So we already know that they're in violation of the law and dealing with hundreds of billions of dollars.
so again, on my desk in Tennessee, this is just an example, ladies and gentlemen, $840 million. I got to get rid of it because it's not doing me any good here. So I'm giving it away, like we've already been talking about. And I'm finding individuals, elected officials, judges, courts, banks, mortgage companies that are more than willing to accept funds from the bad guys without any questions, really. And the bad guys are glad to move the funds because they know that they're going to make money in return, but they're also going to have influence. So they're basically buying a lot of influence.
Right.
And what
They are buying a ton of influence.
I'm sorry.
That is the influence that you're talking about. That is the influence that we're seeing under the Obama regime with the stuff like the Clapper and the Comey and stuff like that. That's the rot and the decay that we're seeing in this nation. And what people need to understand is this is part of that money that has caused these referrals to the DOJ for the seditionist and treasonous activity that we've been seeing. This is the money that has been paying the entire infrastructure that these guys have utilized to be able to do what they've done. And
And
it goes
again,
from that level all the way down to your municipal level.
and again, Chief, this is not just your theory. This is not some concept that you've developed. You have investigated for 15 years or longer, and you have actual proof, documented material proof, and I believe, without getting into it, you have taken said documents, said proof to the federal level under Trump, and they have verified your documents and your proof.
Correct. There are open investigations.
So again, what I'm driving at is what you're sharing seems almost like a movie, TV movie, but it's not. This is a very sophisticated, multidimensional program that's now impacted numerous states. And by that, what we're talking about is the political officials, judges, courts, other influentials in the community. It's impacted them. They've all made buku money out of this, which gives cover, political and other cover, to the bad guys. So the bad guys are moving money, they're making some money, but they're also receiving tremendous cover for another dimension where they are doing illegal things like drug trades, trafficking, and all that. They're covered.
Yes.
So they're making money there through drug trafficking, child trafficking, and other trafficking. And they've got themselves insurance because they've been spending monies all over the nation to provide cover for themselves, political, legal, and otherwise.
Yes.
And this has been proven. This is not a theory. This is not some made up for TV movie.
it has been proven to the point that it requires further investigation from the federal level, which is happening now.
I believe you, ladies and gentlemen. I guess I'm biased in that sense. I've gone through this for 3.5 years periodically with the chief and others. But I appreciate how overwhelming this may sound. I appreciate, without getting into the details, how sophisticated this is and how far reaching this is. So I just wanted, again, thanks, Chief, let people know that this is not your theory. This is not you making up something. You've spent your life, and I know it's been very costly, and I'm not going to get into that. Unless you want to, but I am not going to get into that. Ladies and gentlemen, the gentleman that you're seeing here has paid a hell of a cost. And I don't say stuff like that lightly. We know, and he has stuck with it. Bless his heart. It's been, I'll say this, Chief, your house has been shot up. You've been threatened. You've had to move 2 or 3 times to save your life. And ladies and gentlemen, that's all I'm going to share. But this is not some theory. This is not something he's made up because he's bored. It's been very, very well. I'm just saying that, Chief, because it's been very, very
Yep.
costly to you and your wife, and this is not funny.
Oh yeah.
But
It's people, when you take something on like this isn't something you want to do. Um, God builds us all in a certain way, and
amen.
he puts things in your life for a reason, and he puts people here for a reason, and I do I'm doing this because this is what I feel like I am supposed to do and what I've been sent here to do. And that's I believe in our Lord Savior, and I believe this is his plan, and I'll follow through with it. It's not been easy. It's like you said, Lyle,
I'll,
it's been
I'll
extremely
join
costly.
you. Amen. I believe. I know. We've prayed. We've talked about this. Um, um, I'll join you in heaven when we talk to him about this. Like, can we ask some questions?
Why me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lord, we have a couple of few questions we need to ask you. Just
Yeah.
um,
Yes.
all right. So we've got, from election fairness standpoint, we've we have learned, and Mark Senator Fincham's not here, but I've been privileged to work with him for 12 years also, and also I coordinated both joint legislative hearings on election fraud irregularities in Arizona in 2020 with Mayor Giuliani, and then in 2021. And we provided phenomenal evidence, ladies and gentlemen. And you're seeing, and I think the senators talked about it. We've done other shows on it, and there's more coming. Um, the evidence was not hearsay, it wasn't theoretical, it was hard evidence, kind of like what we're talking about here with the chief. Um, what what we learned was that no matter what was turned in as evidence, Shawn, there were judges, there were courts, there were political officials that wouldn't even give the time of day. They didn't want anything to do with it. And the theory,
Uh,
now I'm going to use it, the theory would be they may have, it's a possibility. And what you're describing is that's similar to the money laundering going on in many states where people were paid to look the other way. And so when something came up about either election fraud or irregularities, no, there is none. We're just looking the other way. Or if there's drug trafficking or other types of crimes, no, there's really nothing here. Move on. Because there was payoffs. That's what I'm hearing you describe. And it's now extended to many states, not just the last time I went through the briefing with you, 25 states, I think. It's gone beyond.
yeah. So we've actually identified in one very key specific area, woman who is over the election office in a county that has one of these magic mortgages, and we can prove beyond the shadow of a doubt that she has assisted in election fraud, assisted in voter fraud, and that the district attorney has also assisted her along with a state police agency. And we've been able to validate that through our evidence that was obtained through open source intelligence, through FOIA requests and things of that nature, as well as having whistleblowers come forward to provide testimony to us and provide letters and things of that nature to us and give us actual physical evidence. And so we know that this money is in these magic mortgages, synthetic mortgages, are going down into our county levels, which are 100% affecting our local elections. We know this. And so much so that we have a case that's happening in one state that the DA has refused to prosecute the election fraud and the voter fraud. And it's to the point that we have a case that's finally moving forward. And that DA was served with a subpoena to have to give testimony. And that DA has now announced his retirement in order to keep from providing testimony, because if they get him under oath, it's over.
The Obama and Biden administrations, I think, have been proving and are continuing to be proven very corrupt in many multiple ways.
Absolutely. And people have to understand that they just didn't walk into office and that, they said, okay, this is what we're going to do. What they have to understand is this is a machine. The infrastructure had to be built previous to them so they could build on what they now have. Okay, so what you have to look at is the preceding, what preceded them. And that takes us all the way back to the George Bush Senior administration and him talking about, this is the new world order, this is a global government and all of that. And then you go into all of that stuff, how that happened. Then you went into the Clinton years, and the Clinton years really, really built this in a major way with the Clinton Foundation, the narcotics trafficking that was happening there that was covered up in Mena, Arkansas, which this case ties to. Um, you have to look at this from a historical standpoint. Just because Obama got into office, this just didn't happen. This has been built. These stones have built this infrastructure, and it's all built on money and power. And as long as they have the money, they can maintain the power. Well, it's time for us to go after the money, which is going to absolutely destroy their infrastructure.
And what you have proven over the years is that this is a very sophisticated, multi-dimensional, multi-level program in multiple states. This is nothing to laugh at. It's very sophisticated.
This is transnational. It's to the point that I am talking with people, other investigative agencies in other countries where they are finding the same thing with the same individuals and the same exact pattern.
Do you know, because Trump's come in and closed the border, and virtually he has that been affecting this now, the money laundering?
Absolutely, because now what's happening is all of these administrative rules that have been in place that were not being enforced, all of the laws that were in place that were not being enforced, now that they're being enforced, is what's happening is that money is starting to dry up. And as that money starts to dry up, what's going to happen is these people are no longer going to have the means to be able to buy that top cover, and that they can't buy the judge, they can't buy the DA, they can't buy this person and that person to be able to help get them out of the trouble that they're in. So as that money dries up, that's the disruption. So what's happening now is President Trump and his people are starting to create disruption. And when you have disruption, what that is it's a divided house. And when you have a divided house, that house is going to fall. So this is the disruption before the dismantling.
Okay. Just really quickly, because I'm in Arizona, and even though Arizona today goes national and you're talking national, Arizona is really, there's elected officials and other officials, public officials, who have benefited from these funds here, isn't there?
Absolutely, 100%. We've got Katie Hobbs tied into this. Colorado, we have Phil Weiser, the state attorney general, tied to this. As many, I mean, there's so many people that are tied into this. It's going to take a lot of intel analysts following the different trails and the different bank accounts and nonprofits to fully understand the scope of the size of the machine that they have built.
Now, let me ask you, I was going to break our show up today into two segments, and I haven't because of what you're sharing. Can you? Well, no. I didn't want to break up anything because
Yeah.
you, ladies and gentlemen, I will tell you, we've done briefings. I don't know how many times, Shawn, where they're 3 hours nonstop. And I will tell you again, I'm repeating myself. A couple of the sheriffs, a couple of the political folks and lawyers, there may be a moment or two where there's silence. Remember, I mean, there was just nobody knew what to ask, nobody knew what to say. Not because these people are not smart; they're very, very smart. But this is so complex, and yet what this gentleman has done is he's brought it down for me to a seventh grade level. And I asked him that each time we had a briefing. I said, "You've got to rework this and bring it down to a seventh grade level." So we can understand it. Instead of taking two segments here, I'm going to just make this an extended Arizona Today. Can you give us a 5 or 10 minute PowerPoint that you had that wanted to show some things?
Yeah, I've got about another maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and we can kind of run through some
Okay.
stuff real quick.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I asked the chief. He had, believe me, he has a 2 hour PowerPoint, and I asked him to whittle it down to 5 to 6, 7 minutes. The reason for this is because you're going to actually see with a PowerPoint what this gentleman has done, and it will show you the very sophisticated schematics of what he's uncovered. Again, not his theory, not his opinion only. He's a professional law enforcement investigator of many years, and his discussions already today on this show have now reached high up in the Trump administration. And that's one of the reasons we're breaking this information now. And they have already reviewed a lot more than what we've talked about on the show. And they are ready to take the next steps. Let me put it that way. They would not do that if this was theory or opinion or just him making up stuff or conspiracy theory. Believe me, you don't go at that level and get away with stuff. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're hearing some things that are really news breaking nationally. Now, Shawn, would you mind taking 5, 10 minutes and show us your PowerPoint and explain it?
So what I'm going to do to, in the interest of time, is I'm going to bring up, because everybody asks, how are things connected? How are things connected? Now, I can sit here and show you document after document and document, but unless you know what you're reading on a document, I can say whatever. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up what's called I2 analyst, and what this is basically this is an electronic form of the what would be considered a murder board, right? So this is an electronic form of a murder board. And what this does is I put in the information, like I said, all of the addresses, phone numbers, businesses, nonprofits, people, and all of that. And what happens is the I2 helps us make the connections. The Pentagon actually used this program to track ISIS in the Middle East. And so we were lucky enough to be able to purchase this program and be able to use it. And let's go ahead and bring that screen up for you. All right. Can we see that now?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So we have Act Blue, and a lot of people think that Act Blue is actually a nonprofit, but it's actually an LLC. And the reason they keep it in LLC is so that they don't have to answer FOIA requests. Okay. So what we have found is we have this executive here, which is Mark Lations. Mark Lations is also on the Civics Act Blue, because Act Blue actually breaks up into several little things. And so he's on the board there. So that's continuity for Act Blue. But he's also an executive on the New Organizing Institute, which is one of those social justice nonprofits. And what we found is that one of the founder of the New Organizing Institute, Rosalind Lemieux, is also part owner of Fission Strategy and a bunch of other nonprofits and things like that. But what we also learned is that she is one of the individuals that also has one of these magic mortgages for the hundreds of millions of dollars. Okay. So basically, she has these nonprofits that she's tied to that goes into the NOI, the New Organizing Institute, that's tied directly to Mark Lations, he's a board member of, and he's also one of the board members of Act Blue. Then we have Magente, which is another social justice movement for the transsexual Latino community. And we have this gentleman here who is a member of that, Geronimo Saldana, and he is also part of the Open Society Institute, another nonprofit that is doing business with Act Blue. So what that does is that triangulates all of that. But Open Society is also part of Arabella Advisors, which is tied to Kimberly Peeler Allen, who also works for Letitia James, the New York uh, State Attorney General. And Letitia James is, of course, one of the board members of Kimberly Peeler Allen is one of the board members of Act Blue. Kimberly Peeler Allen is also one of the founders. She's the founder of Higher Heights for America, and that goes into these two young ladies. We all know them. Okay. That also goes into Jet Mortgage, goes into Letitia James. What we've also found is that Kimberly Peeler Allen, who's tied to Letitia James, goes into another nonprofit called the Fund for Public Health in New York City, another nonprofit, the Center for Biomedical Research, into Rockefeller University, into the International Health Awareness Network. So what we're doing is we are literally mapping out all of their organizations. This young lady here is tied to Act Blue. She's one of the directors of Act Blue. Her name is Darcy Berner. Darcy is the chair for the Center for International Policy, Advancing a Peaceful, Just, and Sustainable World out of DC, and that goes into the Clooney Foundation, or is the Clooney Foundation. Okay. We also know that some of the people that are attached to this have mortgages on their homes, a sale of 26 million on a $300,000 property with a loan, hard money loan of 25 million. So what they've done is they've built this complete infrastructure. We have Mr. Saldana, who's also part of Latinos for Justice. That's part of Democracy Forward. And Democracy Forward goes into Open Society Institute. And then we know that this gentleman right here, Samuel Oliker, is a board member of Democracy Forward. He's also tied to the NOI with this young lady here, the Rosalind Lemieux, who has one of those magic mortgages. So that, and then Project Mobilize, which again is another social justice movement. With the New World Foundation going into the Center for Social Inclusion, DEI, and Opus Dei, which Opus Dei just got hit with a major lawsuit in South America for human trafficking. So what we're doing is we're putting together these nets. We found out that one of the Tennessee Three, Justin Jones, received 422 identical campaign contributions through Act Blue, and those exact 422 people on the same day happened to give the exact same amount of money to Justin Frost, who's a congressman out of Florida, who's also part of the social justice movement. We also found out that one of the nonprofits that he's tied to, that one of the other members of that nonprofit has a magic mortgage or is working with that mortgage company as well. We have found that they have ties into people like Eric Holder. We have found that it goes into the Royal Business Bank of China out of California, um, into numerous law firms. And that's one of the things that they're doing is using lawfare and civil action against people like President Trump to stop him from moving forward. And so this is a complete plan that has been put together by people like Arabella, Democracy Forward, and Act Blue. Each one of them has a different part that they play in this to create disruption on on Trump and his people, and basically the American public. These are the people that have infiltrated, that are trying to bring the socialism to this country on behalf of a foreign adversary, utilizing human trafficking proceeds and narcotics trafficking proceeds.
Chief, thank you. I know you've got to run. I'm going to get this out really as soon as possible. Ladies and gentlemen, we haven't even touched the tip of the iceberg. I would say the chief might correct me on that. We will come back and we will share some more. I know Senator Fincham has really been involved in this also. He's an Arizona state legislator, but he has really been involved from the get-go, almost, not as long as the chief, and through Election Fairness Institute, because it's all connected. And I am so grateful to you, Chief, that you've taken time out. I know you've got to run. So, ladies and gentlemen, I truly pray that you've gained a lot of information here. There's more. And actually, Shawn, I think not today, but let's meet and talk. Let's do this again at this level, because what you've done is you've taken a very sophisticated, multi-level, interstate, intercontinental crime, and you've brought it down so we can all have a better understanding of it. It's superb. Thank you so much. That's hard work in itself. Ladies and gentlemen, I've seen lots of intel on this over the last 3.5 years. Correct me, Chief. And it is sophisticated. It is very cumbersome almost. And this gentleman, it's so provable. He's documented and then backed up and then backed up all of it. This is not theory. This is not his opinion. This is not some conspiracy theory. Thank you again. I know I've done it 3 times, but thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, I'll thank him again and again. It has cost you. Ladies and gentlemen, his house was shot up. He was threatened, more than threatened. There were attempts on his life. He and his wife, they've had to move a good couple of times. This has not been funny. What he has just shared with you is really the tip of the iceberg, but you can see how far reaching it goes. And you can see why all of these names that are now starting to come out, not just the Clintons and the Comeys and the Reagans and all of that, but they don't want any of this out. Because once that starts to unfold, it's going to unfold pretty quickly, I would think, because it's so intertwined. And you start to pull it apart, and it's just going to fall apart real quickly. And there's a lot of names. We mentioned Governor Governor Hobbs in Arizona. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not even the tip of the iceberg, Shawn. I mean, there's elected officials, attorney generals, city attorneys. Oh my gosh, it's just a name. It's a who's who, basically, in the political and public arenas. This gentleman, it has been very costly, but fortunately, most fortunately, he's been able to take a far more in-depth briefing and take it to the FBI director, the attorney general, and a couple of others unnamed in the Trump administration, just in the last couple of weeks, I believe, Shawn. And they went, wow, you've got the documents and the proof. He's proven it. And now the process is beginning to say, what do we need to do? How do we go about? Because this is huge. This is nationwide. So thank you for all you've done for 15 years plus. And thank you that I've had this much of a part. I don't know if you can see me, ladies and gentlemen, this much of a part for 3.5 years. He's put up with me and has asked for my political intelligence and consultations and stuff. And I think personally, he drinks a little bit after he's done with me. Some of that special, special creek water down there in the South. But he keeps asking me to come back, and I haven't figured that one out. So, so thank you, Shawn. I mean that most sincerely. I'm having some fun, but
Thank you.
uh, I know that we do another show, and we'll work it in such a way where you can present more information of a little bit different nature than what you've done today. Ladies and gentlemen, this is very sophisticated, and it is part of the one world order to collapse the United States. And there's no better way. Please, Shawn, speak in before we leave. There's no better way than to get the people who hold political office, the judiciary, and all that on board with you.
I want people to think about it like this.
Yeah.
This is the rot that these people have put into an apple. Okay, let's take an apple for instance. When you
Okay.
take a bite out of that apple and you open up the skin of that apple and you allow that rotten decay into that apple, what happens is the structure of that apple starts to break down.
Yeah.
Okay, and it gets to the point that if you were to take your hand and slap it down on that apple after it's been sitting out for several days, it's just going to turn to mush. And that's what these people have done to all of our different infrastructures, whether it's our banking infrastructure, our courts, our judiciary, our political infrastructure. That's what they've done. But what we're going to do is once that hand of God comes down and
Yeah.
smashes that apple,
Amen.
there's one thing that's left, and that's the seeds. The seeds that are left behind are going to be the rule of law that's been brought to us by our Constitution for us to rebuild to make sure this doesn't happen again. And that's what we're going to do.
Thank you so much, Chief. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I thank my guest once more, Shawn Taylor, and thank you for all that you've done. That maybe some of it people will never know the cost and the late nights and all the rest. But now I think with all the work you've accomplished, it's now time to harvest it. And
Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen, I pray that's what's about to happen. That's why we're having this announcement, this show, to start the process of publicly sharing with people what's about to come. So, on behalf of my guest, I'm Lyle Rapacki, and that's how I see things from Arizona.